Have you ever wondered how far someone would go to escape their own lies? What happens when trust turns into betrayal, and love becomes a weapon? This is the story of Olivia Carter, a woman who lost everything but found the strength to fight back. It starts with a car ride into the wilderness, and ends with a truth that will change her life forever. The tires of the black SUV crunched over gravel as it wound its way deeper into the forest. Olivia Carter sat in the passenger seat, her hands resting limply on her lap. She stared out the window at the towering trees that seemed to close in around them like silent sentinels. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the road and painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. It should have been beautiful, a quiet escape from the chaos of life, but instead, it felt ominous. Jason, her husband of 8 years, gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white against the leather. His jaw was clenched, and his eyes remained fixed straight ahead, never once glancing at her. There was something about his demeanor tonight, cold, distant, that made Olivia's stomach churn with unease. "Where are we going?" she asked finally, breaking the suffocating silence. Her voice came out softer than she intended, almost hesitant. Jason didn't answer immediately. When he did speak, his tone was clipped. "You'll see when we get there." Olivia frowned. This wasn't like him. Jason had always been charming, even playful. But lately, things between them had changed. Ever since the accident 6 months ago, the one that left her paralyzed from the waist down, she'd noticed a shift. He'd become withdrawn, impatient, sometimes even cruel. At first, she chalked it up to stress. Being married to someone who needed constant care couldn't be easy. But this cold detachment felt different. Calculated. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, wincing as her body protested the movement. The wheelchair strapped in the back of the SUV rattled slightly with every bump in the road. Normally, she hated relying on others for help, but tonight, for some reason, she wished Jason would turn around and take her home. Something about this trip felt wrong. As they drove further into the woods, the paved road gave way to dirt, then eventually to nothing more than a narrow, uneven path barely wide enough for the SUV. Branches scraped against the sides of the vehicle, making an eerie scraping sound that echoed through the cabin. Olivia glanced at the dashboard clock. It was nearly 7:30 p.m. In another hour, it would be pitch dark out here. They were miles away from civilization, and no one knew where they were going. Her gaze drifted to the back seat, where a large suitcase sat propped against the door. It looked old, worn, and oddly heavy for something meant for a casual weekend getaway. Why had Jason brought it? And why hadn't he mentioned packing anything before they left? "Jason," she said again, her voice firmer this time. "What's in the suitcase?" He stiffened visibly but didn't look at her. "Nothing you need to worry about." That response only deepened her unease. She opened her mouth to press him further, but before she could say anything, the SUV hit a particularly large pothole, jolting both of them. Olivia let out a small cry of pain as her legs bounced awkwardly in the footwell. Jason muttered something under his breath, though whether it was directed at her or the road, she couldn't tell. The air inside the car grew heavier with each passing mile. Olivia tried to distract herself by focusing on the scenery outside, but the dense trees offered little comfort. Every so often, she thought she saw movement in the rearview mirror, a flicker of headlights far behind them, perhaps. But when she turned to look, there was nothing. Just empty road stretching endlessly into the horizon. "Are we being followed?" she blurted out suddenly, unable to shake the feeling. Jason's head snapped toward her, his expression unreadable. "What makes you think that?" "I don't know," she admitted. I keep seeing lights in the mirror." For a moment, he hesitated, his fingers tightening on the wheel. Then he shrugged dismissively. "It's probably just another car. Don't worry about it." But Olivia couldn't stop worrying. Her mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. What if someone was following them? Or worse, what if Jason was lying? The suitcase, the remote location, his strange behavior, it all pointed to something sinister. She wanted to ask him outright what was going on, but fear held her tongue. If she pushed too hard, would he snap? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jason slowed the SUV to a stop. They were in a small clearing surrounded by thick trees, their branches twisting together like gnarled fingers. The headlights illuminated the area briefly before Jason turned off the engine, plunging them into near darkness. Only the faint glow of the dashboard lights remained. "We're here," he announced flatly, unbuckling his seatbelt. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest. "Here? Where is here?" He ignored her question, climbing out of the car without another word. She watched him walk to the back of the SUV and open the hatch, revealing the suitcase. As he hoisted it onto his shoulder, she realized how heavy it must be. Whatever was inside, it wasn't clothes. Panic bubbled up inside her. She fumbled with the door handle, desperate to get out, to confront him. But her legs refused to cooperate, useless beneath her. Tears stung her eyes as frustration and fear overwhelmed her. "Jason," she called out, her voice trembling. "What are you doing?" He slammed the hatch shut and turned to face her, his silhouette framed by the fading light. For the first time, she saw it clearly, the coldness in his eyes, the lack of remorse. Whatever love they'd once shared was gone, replaced by something darker. "You'll understand soon enough," he said simply, his tone devoid of emotion. And then he started walking away, leaving her alone in the car, stranded in the middle of nowhere. Unbeknownst to either of them, a pair of headlights flickered in the distance, hidden among the trees. A shadowy figure stepped out of a parked car, binoculars raised to their face. They watched silently as Jason disappeared into the woods, dragging the suitcase behind him. Whoever, or whatever, they weren't there to help. Not yet. The clearing was eerily silent except for the sound of Jason's boots crunching against the gravel as he walked toward the back of the SUV. Olivia sat frozen in her seat, her mind racing to make sense of what was happening. The car door creaked open on his side, and she heard him rummaging around in the trunk. Her heart pounded harder with every second that passed. "Jason," she called out again, her voice shaking. "What are you doing? Where are we?" He didn't respond. Instead, he slammed the hatch shut and reappeared at her door, holding a small duffel bag in one hand and a flashlight in the other. His face was unreadable, but there was an icy determination in his eyes that sent chills down her spine. "Get out," he said flatly, his tone devoid of emotion. Olivia blinked, stunned. "What? Why? What's going on, Jason?" "You know exactly why," he snapped, his patience clearly wearing thin. This whole thing has gone on long enough." Her stomach twisted into knots. "What do you mean, long enough? I'm your wife. You're supposed to take care of me." His lips curled into a sneer, something she'd never seen before. It was as if all the love they'd shared, the laughter, the promises, had been nothing more than a facade. "Take care of you," he repeated bitterly. "Do you even hear yourself? You're not the same person anymore, Olivia. You can't walk, you can't work, you can't do anything. All you do is sit there, expecting me to drop everything for you." "That's not fair," she cried, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't choose this. The accident wasn't my fault." "No, it wasn't," he admitted coldly. "But it's still my life that's ruined because of it." Her breath hitched in her throat. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. This wasn't the man she'd married. The Jason she knew would have stood by her no matter what. But now, looking into his stony face, she realized how wrong she'd been about him all along. "I've made arrangements," he continued, his voice clipped and businesslike. There's a shelter about 10 miles east of here. They'll find you eventually. A shelter? She whispered, her voice breaking. You're leaving me in the middle of nowhere. It's better this way, he said, avoiding her gaze. For both of us. Before she could protest further, he grabbed her arm, not gently, and began pulling her out of the car. Olivia struggled weakly, trying to resist, but her useless legs made it impossible to fight back. He dragged her onto the uneven ground, dropping her unceremoniously onto the dirt. Jason, please, she begged, clutching at his sleeve. Don't do this. We can fix this together. Please, just give me another chance. There's nothing left to fix, he interrupted, prying her fingers off his arm. I'm done, Olivia. Done pretending everything's okay when it's not. Done carrying the weight of your mess. She stared up at him, her vision blurred by tears. How can you say that? After everything we've been through. He cut her off with a sharp laugh, devoid of humor. That's the problem, you haven't been through anything. Not really. You just sit there, feeling sorry for yourself while I pick up the pieces. Well, guess what? I'm tired of picking up the pieces. With that, he tossed the duffel bag and flashlight onto the ground beside her. Inside the bag, she could see a few bottles of water, some granola bars, and a blanket. It was barely enough to survive the night, let alone trek 10 miles through dense forest. You'll be fine, he said dismissively, already turning back toward the SUV. Just stay put until someone finds you. Wait, she screamed, reaching out for him. Jason, don't leave me here. Please. But he didn't look back. He climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and backed out of the clearing without so much as a glance in her direction. For a moment, the red glow of the taillights illuminated the trees around her, then they disappeared entirely, swallowed by the darkness. Olivia sat there in stunned silence, the reality of her situation slowly sinking in. She was alone. Completely and utterly alone. The forest loomed around her, vast and unforgiving, its shadows stretching endlessly in every direction. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, the sound echoing hauntingly through the trees. Her body trembled, not just from fear, but from the biting cold of the autumn night. She pulled the blanket from the duffel bag and wrapped it tightly around herself, though it did little to ease the chill seeping into her bones. The flashlight lay beside her, its beam flickering faintly when she turned it on. She shone it around the clearing, hoping to see some sign of civilization, a cabin, a road, anything, but there was nothing. Just endless wilderness. Tears streamed down her face as she leaned back against the tree behind her, clutching the flashlight like a lifeline. How had it come to this? How had the man she loved turned into a stranger overnight? And most importantly, how was she going to survive? For the first time in months, Olivia felt truly powerless. But as the minutes ticked by and the shock began to wear off, a spark of anger ignited deep within her. Jason might have abandoned her, but she refused to give up. She wouldn't let him win. Whatever it took, she would find a way to get out of this forest, and when she did, she vowed to make him pay for what he'd done. Liam Foster crouched low behind the thick trunk of an ancient oak tree, his sharp eyes trained on the scene unfolding in the clearing. He had been following Jason's SUV for miles, keeping a safe distance to avoid detection. Something about this trip had felt off from the start: Jason's erratic driving, the remote location, the suitcase in the back seat. Years of military training and private investigation work had honed Liam's instincts, and right now, they were screaming that something was very, very wrong. He watched silently as Jason dragged Olivia out of the car, her protests echoing faintly through the stillness of the forest. Even from this distance, Liam could see the desperation in her movements, the way her hands clawed at Jason's arm as if trying to hold on to whatever shred of humanity he might have left. But Jason's face, it was cold, detached, almost mechanical. This wasn't just a fight between a husband and wife. No, this was calculated cruelty, a betrayal so deep it made Liam's blood boil. As Jason tossed the duffel bag and flashlight onto the ground beside Olivia, Liam clenched his fists, fighting the urge to step out of the shadows and intervene. Patience, he reminded himself. Timing was everything. If he acted too soon, Jason might turn around or worse, come back to finish what he'd started. Liam needed to wait until the man was truly gone before revealing himself. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jason climbed back into the SUV and drove off, leaving Olivia alone in the clearing. The red glow of the taillights disappeared into the darkness, and the forest fell eerily silent once again. Only then did Liam allow himself to move. He stepped cautiously out from behind the tree, his boots crunching softly against the gravel. Every step was deliberate, measured. Years of combat experience had taught him how to navigate hostile environments without drawing attention to himself. But tonight, stealth wasn't his primary concern. What mattered most was getting to Olivia before panic, or worse, hypothermia, took hold. Olivia sat slumped against a tree, clutching the flashlight like a lifeline. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, and even in the dim light, Liam could see the tracks of tears streaming down her face. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile than he remembered. It had been years since they'd last seen each other, years filled with bitterness and regret, but none of that mattered now. All that mattered was keeping her alive. The sound of his footsteps must have reached her ears because she suddenly stiffened, her head snapping up. Her hand tightened around the flashlight, and she shone its beam wildly into the darkness. "Who's there?" she shouted, her voice trembling with fear. "Show yourself." Liam raised both hands slightly, palms outward, as a gesture of peace. "It's okay," he said calmly, his deep voice cutting through the tension. "I'm not here to hurt you." She swung the flashlight toward the source of the voice, illuminating his face for the first time. For a split second, they simply stared at each other, shock written plainly across both their expressions. "Liam," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. "Is that really you?" He nodded slowly, lowering his hands but staying where he was. "Yeah, it's me, Olivia. I've been following you too." When I saw what happened, his jaw tightened, anger flashing in his dark eyes. "I knew I couldn't let him leave you here like this." Recognition dawned on her face, followed quickly by disbelief. You were watching? Why didn't you stop him?" "I wanted to," Liam admitted, taking a cautious step closer. "But I couldn't risk him coming back. Not yet. Trust me, Olivia, if I thought for 1 second he'd stick around, I would have put a bullet in his tire myself." Despite everything, a small, humorless laugh escaped her lips. "Some things never change, huh? Always the hero." He frowned, shaking his head. "This isn't about being a hero. It's about survival. You're not safe here, and we need to get moving before it gets any colder." Her gaze dropped to the ground, and she hugged the blanket tighter around herself. "I don't understand," she murmured. "Why would Jason do this? After everything we've been through." Liam sighed heavily, kneeling down a few feet away from her. "I wish I had all the answers, but I don't. What I do know is that people can surprise you, in good ways and bad. And right now, your ex-husband is proving to be someone you never should have trusted." The mention of ex-husband stung, but Olivia didn't argue. Deep down, she already knew their marriage was over. Whatever love they'd once shared had died somewhere along the road, replaced by resentment and despair. Still, it hurt to hear it said aloud. "What are we going to do?" she asked quietly, finally meeting his gaze. There was vulnerability in her eyes, but also a flicker of determination. She wasn't ready to give up, not yet. "We'll figure it out," Liam assured her, his tone firm but gentle. "First, we need to find shelter. These woods aren't forgiving, especially at night. Then, when the time is right, we'll make sure Jason pays for what he's done." A single tear slid down her cheek, but she nodded resolutely. "Okay. Let's go." Liam stood and offered her his hand. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure whether she could trust him after all these years. But looking into his steady, unwavering gaze, she realized she didn't have much of a choice. He was her only hope. Taking a deep breath, she placed her hand in his, letting him help her to her feet. The weight of her body rested heavily on her arms, but Liam supported her effortlessly, his strength a comforting presence in the chaos of the night. "Stay close to me," he instructed, picking up the duffel bag and flashlight. "And keep talking. I want to hear your voice so I know you're still with me." As they began their slow, painstaking journey through the forest, Olivia couldn't help but feel a strange sense of déjà vu. Years ago, during their brief romance, Liam had always been the one to pull her out of tough situations. Back then, she'd pushed him away, convinced she didn't need anyone's help. Now, faced with her darkest hour, she found herself grateful for his presence. For the first time since Jason abandoned her, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't completely alone. Liam adjusted the strap of the duffel bag on his shoulder as he studied Olivia carefully under the dim glow of the flashlight. Her lips were already tinged with blue, and her shivering had grown more violent despite the blanket wrapped tightly around her. The temperature in the forest was dropping rapidly now that night had fully set in, and Liam knew they didn't have much time. "You're going into shock," he said quietly, his voice laced with urgency. "We need to get you warm, and fast." Olivia nodded weakly, though her eyes remained distant, clouded by a mixture of fear and disbelief. She hadn't spoken much since they began walking, but Liam could see the storm raging behind her gaze. The betrayal still felt raw, like an open wound she wasn't ready to acknowledge yet. "Can you walk at all?" he asked, crouching down beside her. She shook her head, tears welling up again. "My legs. I can't feel them anymore. They're just gone." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's okay. You don't have to walk. That's what I'm here for." Without waiting for a response, Liam scooped her up effortlessly into his arms, cradling her against his chest. She let out a small gasp of surprise but didn't resist. His body radiated warmth, a stark contrast to the icy chill creeping through her own. For the first time since Jason left her stranded in the clearing, Olivia allowed herself to relax, just slightly. "You're not dying here tonight," Liam murmured, his tone firm and unwavering. "Not on my watch." The weight of his words settled over her, grounding her in the present moment. As much as she wanted to give in to despair, there was something about Liam's presence that made her believe him. He wasn't the same reckless young man she'd known years ago. This version of Liam was steady, confident, and determined. If anyone could get her out of this nightmare, it was him. With Olivia secure in his arms, Liam began moving through the dense woods, using the flashlight sparingly to conserve its battery. The beam of light cut through the darkness just enough to illuminate roots and rocks in their path, allowing him to navigate without tripping. Every step was deliberate, calculated. Years of military training had taught him how to move efficiently even in the most treacherous environments. As they trudged forward, Olivia rested her head against his shoulder, her breathing shallow but steady. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, it was a shared understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of everything left unsaid. Memories of their past relationship flickered briefly in her mind, late-night conversations, stolen kisses, arguments that ended in tears. But those moments felt like another lifetime now, buried beneath layers of pain and regret. "How did you know to follow us?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Liam hesitated before answering. "I've been keeping tabs on you for a while," he admitted. "After your accident, I heard rumors, things about Jason. At first, I thought I was being paranoid, but when I saw him loading that suitcase into the car earlier today, I knew something was wrong. So I followed." Olivia swallowed hard, guilt gnawing at her. "You shouldn't have had to save me," she said softly. "I should have seen it coming. I should have left him ages ago." "Stop," Liam interrupted gently, tightening his grip on her. "Don't do that to yourself. None of this is your fault. Jason made his choice tonight, and it says more about him than it does about you." His words struck a chord deep within her, and for the first time in months, Olivia felt a spark of self-worth ignite. Maybe Liam was right. Maybe she deserved better than the life she'd been living, a life where she'd sacrificed her own happiness for someone who clearly didn't value her. They continued on in silence for several minutes, the only sounds the crunch of leaves beneath Liam's boots and the occasional rustle of branches overhead. The forest seemed endless, its shadows stretching impossibly far in every direction. But Liam pressed onward, his focus unshakable. Meanwhile, miles away, Jason sat in the driver's seat of his SUV, parked along a deserted highway. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number with trembling fingers. After 2 rings, a woman's voice answered. "It's done," he said flatly, his tone devoid of emotion. "She's gone." On the other end of the line, Lauren Mitchell exhaled sharply, relief evident in her voice. "Are you sure? What if someone finds her?" "She's in the middle of nowhere," Jason replied coldly. "No one's going to find her. Not tonight, anyway. By the time they do, it'll be too late." Lauren fell silent for a moment, then spoke again, her voice softer now. "And us? What happens next?" "We stick to the plan," he said firmly. "Tomorrow morning, we leave town. Start fresh somewhere no one knows us." Unbeknownst to either of them, their conversation was being recorded. Hidden among the trees, a small device planted earlier by Liam transmitted every word back to his truck, where Jack Mercer listened intently, jotting down notes. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and soon, justice would come knocking at Jason's door. Back in the forest, Liam finally spotted the faint outline of his truck parked near the edge of the tree line. Relief washed over him as he quickened his pace, his muscles burning from the effort of carrying Olivia for so long. When they reached the vehicle, he opened the passenger door and carefully lowered her onto the seat, draping another blanket over her shoulders. "Almost there," he assured her, climbing into the driver's seat. "Just hang on a little longer." As the engine roared to life and they sped away from the forest, Olivia closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the heater seep into her bones. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself to hope. Whatever lay ahead, she wouldn't face it alone, not anymore. The first thing Olivia noticed when she woke was the warmth. It enveloped her like a cocoon, chasing away the bone-deep chill that had plagued her for hours, or maybe days, she couldn't quite remember. Her eyes fluttered open slowly, adjusting to the soft glow of lamplight illuminating the room. The space was small but cozy, with wooden walls and mismatched furniture that gave it a rustic charm. A fire crackled softly in the corner, its heat radiating through the cabin. She shifted slightly, wincing as stiff muscles protested the movement. That's when she realized she wasn't alone. Across the room, seated at a sturdy wooden table, was Liam. He was hunched over a laptop, his brow furrowed in concentration as he typed rapidly. His jacket was slung over the back of the chair, revealing a plain black t-shirt stretched taut across his broad shoulders. For a moment, Olivia simply watched him, marveling at how different he seemed from the man she'd known years ago. There was a quiet confidence about him now, an air of purpose that hadn't been there before. "Hey," he said suddenly, glancing up and catching her gaze. "You're awake." Olivia blinked, momentarily disoriented. Where are we?" "My place," Liam replied, closing the laptop and standing. He crossed the room in a few strides, pulling up a chair beside her. "It's safe here. No one knows about this cabin except me, and now you." Her mind raced to piece together how she'd gotten here. Fragments of memory surfaced: the forest, the cold, Liam carrying her through the darkness. She remembered snippets of their conversation, his promise that she wouldn't die out there. But beyond that, everything felt hazy, like fragments of a dream she couldn't fully grasp. "How long have I been asleep?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "A few hours," Liam answered. "You needed rest. Your body's been through a lot." Olivia nodded faintly, her gaze dropping to her hands, which were clasped tightly in her lap. "I don't even know what to say. Thank you, for saving me." Liam leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. "You don't need to thank me. I did what anyone would have done." "No," she countered softly, shaking her head. "Not everyone would have done what you did. Most people would have just driven past and pretended they didn't see anything." He didn't respond immediately, his expression thoughtful. After a moment, he said, "I'm not most people, Olivia. And neither are you." She looked up at him then, searching his face for answers to questions she hadn't yet voiced. "Why are you helping me, Liam? After everything, after how things ended between us?" His jaw tightened briefly, but his tone remained calm. "Because you deserve better than the hand you've been dealt. Better than Jason. Better than whatever hell you've been living in these past few months." Tears welled up in her eyes again, though this time they weren't born of fear or despair. Instead, they stemmed from something deeper, a mixture of gratitude and regret. Regret for pushing him away all those years ago, for letting pride and stubbornness keep them apart. If she'd only listened to him back then, maybe none of this would have happened. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "For everything. For not trusting you. For shutting you out." Liam sighed heavily, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. "We both made mistakes, Olivia. But that's in the past. What matters now is figuring out how to move forward." She wiped at her tears with trembling fingers, trying to compose herself. "What do we do next?" "For starters," he began, leaning forward slightly, "we make sure Jason doesn't get away with what he did. Abandoning you in the woods like that, it's attempted murder, plain and simple. And based on some intel I've gathered, it's not the first time he's crossed a line." Olivia frowned, confusion clouding her features. "What do you mean?" Liam hesitated before speaking, choosing his words carefully. "After your accident, I started digging into Jason's background. Something about him never sat right with me, even back when you two were together. Turns out my instincts weren't wrong. He's been embezzling money from clients at his firm, using fake accounts to cover his tracks. Lauren, that assistant of his? She's more than just an employee. They've been planning to disappear together for months." The revelation hit Olivia like a punch to the gut. All this time, she'd thought Jason was stressed because of her condition, because of the financial strain of her medical bills. But the truth was far worse. He'd been lying to her, manipulating her, all while plotting his escape. "I can't believe this," she murmured, shaking her head in disbelief. "How could I have been so blind?" "You weren't blind," Liam assured her gently. "You trusted him. That's not a flaw, it's a strength. Jason's the one who betrayed that trust." She fell silent for a moment, processing everything he'd told her. Then, almost hesitantly, she asked, "What happens now?" "Now," Liam said firmly, meeting her gaze, "we fight back. We gather evidence, expose Jason for who he really is, and make sure he pays for what he's done. You won't have to face this alone, I'll be with you every step of the way." Olivia felt a lump rise in her throat, but she managed a small nod. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel something other than fear or anger. Hope. Fragile and tentative, but hope nonetheless. As Liam stood and added another log to the fire, casting flickering shadows across the walls, Olivia realized she wasn't just surviving anymore. With Liam by her side, she might actually start living again. The fire in the cabin crackled softly, its warmth filling the room as Liam paced back and forth, his phone pressed to his ear. Olivia sat on the edge of the worn couch, wrapped in a thick blanket, watching him intently. His voice was low but urgent, each word carrying the weight of purpose. "Jack, it's me," Liam said into the phone. "I need your help. Something big just landed in my lap." There was a pause as the person on the other end responded. Olivia strained to hear the faint murmur of Jack's voice but couldn't make out the words. She shifted slightly, her fingers clutching the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Despite the heat from the fire, she still felt cold, inside. "What do you mean, big?" Jack asked, his tone curious. Liam exhaled sharply, glancing over at Olivia before continuing. "It's Jason Carter, you remember him? Architect guy. He abandoned his wife, Olivia, in the woods last night. Left her there to die." Olivia flinched at the blunt way Liam described what had happened, even though she knew it was true. Hearing it spoken aloud made it feel more real, more horrifying. Her stomach churned as she pictured Jason's cold expression, the way he'd tossed her aside like she was nothing more than an inconvenience. "That's messed up," Jack replied, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Why would he do that?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Liam said grimly. "But I've got a hunch it's not just about her medical bills or whatever excuse he might have given her. There's something else going on here. Something bigger." He paused, then added, "Pull up his financials. Start with recent transactions, especially anything tied to Olivia's accounts. If I'm right, this isn't just abandonment, it's theft." Olivia's eyes widened at the accusation. Theft? Could Jason really have stolen from her? The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea rolling through her gut. She'd trusted him completely, handing over control of their finances after the accident because she didn't think she could handle it herself. Had he betrayed her trust in the worst possible way? On the other end of the line, Jack's typing echoed faintly against the receiver. After a few moments, he spoke again, his tone shifting to one of surprise. "You're not gonna believe this, man. Looks like Jason's been siphoning money out of Olivia's accounts for months. Big chunks of cash, too. And get this, most of it's being funneled into offshore accounts under fake names." Liam stopped pacing, his jaw tightening. Offshore accounts? That confirms it. He wasn't planning to stick around. He was setting her up to take the fall while he disappeared with everything. "Damn," Jack muttered. "This guy's playing dirty. What's the plan?" "We expose him," Liam said firmly. "But we need hard proof, documents, records, anything we can use to nail him to the wall. Can you dig deeper? Find any emails, contracts, anything linking him to Lauren Mitchell?" "Already on it," Jack replied. "I'll send you everything I find by morning." "Good," Liam said, nodding. "And keep it quiet. We don't want him catching wind of what we're doing." "Understood." "You two stay safe," Jack added before hanging up. Liam lowered the phone and turned to face Olivia, who looked pale and shaken. He crossed the room and knelt in front of her, placing a reassuring hand on her knee. "Hey," he said gently. "Are you okay?" She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "How could he do this to me, Liam? All those months, all those times he acted like he cared, it was all a lie." "It's not your fault," Liam reminded her, his voice steady. "Jason's the one who chose to deceive you. He's the one who decided to throw away everything you shared for his own selfish gain." "But why?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why go through all that trouble? Why pretend to care when he clearly never did?" Liam hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Some people are good at hiding who they really are. They wear masks until they don't need them anymore. Jason played the part of the devoted husband long enough to get what he wanted. But now that he thinks he's gotten away with it, his true colors are showing. Olivia wiped at her tears with trembling hands, struggling to process everything. It felt like the ground beneath her feet had been ripped away, leaving her unmoored and vulnerable. Yet, amidst the pain and betrayal, there was also anger, a slow-burning rage that fueled her determination to fight back. "What happens next?" she asked finally, her voice firmer now. "We take him down," Liam said without hesitation. "But we need proof. Hard evidence that ties him to the embezzlement and the offshore accounts. Once we have that, we'll bring it to Detective Sarah Dawson. She specializes in cases like this: domestic abuse, financial exploitation, the whole 9 yards." Olivia nodded, though doubt lingered in her eyes. "And if we can't prove it?" "We will," Liam assured her, his gaze unwavering. "I promise you, Olivia. We're not letting him walk away from this scot-free." For the first time since the ordeal began, Olivia allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope. With Liam beside her, she realized she wasn't powerless anymore. Together, they would uncover the truth, and justice would come knocking at Jason's door. The morning sun streamed through the small, frosted windows of Liam's cabin, casting golden streaks across the wooden floor. Olivia sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her, fingers hovering hesitantly over the keyboard. The screen displayed the login page for an old email account she hadn't accessed in years, one she'd set up long before meeting Jason. It had been a backup, a place to store important documents and correspondence just in case. Now, it felt like a lifeline. "You sure you're ready for this?" Liam asked from where he stood by the counter, pouring 2 cups of steaming coffee. His tone was gentle but firm, his eyes fixed on her. Olivia took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. "I don't think I'll ever be ready," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But we need answers. And if they're in here," she gestured toward the laptop. "Then I have to look." Liam nodded, setting one of the mugs down beside her. "Take your time. I'm right here." With a shaky hand, Olivia typed in her password and hit enter. The inbox loaded almost instantly, rows of unread emails filling the screen. At first glance, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, mostly junk mail and newsletters. But as she scrolled further back, something caught her eye, a series of messages between her and Jason from shortly after their wedding. They were innocuous enough at first, discussing finances and investments. But buried within the thread was something far more sinister. "Liam," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Look at this." He leaned over her shoulder, scanning the text. One particular email stood out, a forwarded message from Jason to himself, detailing instructions for transferring funds into an offshore account. Attached was a spreadsheet listing various amounts, dates, and account numbers. The language was clinical, detached, as if Jason were simply conducting business rather than orchestrating a betrayal. "That's it," Liam said quietly, his jaw tightening. "This is the smoking gun we've been looking for." Olivia stared at the screen, her chest tightening with a mix of anger and disbelief. "He planned this all along," she murmured. "Even when we were happy, or at least, when I thought we were, he was already thinking about how to leave me behind." Her hands trembled as she minimized the window and opened another tab, logging into her personal bank accounts. What she saw there confirmed her worst fears. Large sums of money had been withdrawn or transferred without her knowledge, leaving only a fraction of what should have been there. Her savings, her inheritance, all gone. "I trusted him," she said bitterly, tears welling up again. "I gave him control because I thought he loved me. Instead, he used me." Liam placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll make sure he pays for this, Olivia. Every penny he stole, every lie he told, it's all going to come back to haunt him." Just then, Liam's phone buzzed on the table. He picked it up and glanced at the screen. "It's Jack." "Put it on speaker," Olivia urged. "I want to hear what he has to say." Liam tapped the green button and set the phone down. Go ahead, Jack. Got some good news, and some bad. Jack's gravelly voice came through the speaker. The good news is, I traced Jason's offshore accounts. Turns out, he's been funneling money through shell companies for months. I've got documentation linking everything back to him. And the bad? Liam prompted. The bad is, Lauren Mitchell's name keeps popping up too, Jack replied grimly. She's not just his assistant, she's his accomplice. They've been working together since before Olivia's accident. There are emails between them planning the whole thing, how to fake her death, disappear with the money, start fresh somewhere else. Olivia's breath hitched in her throat. Lauren, the woman who'd always seemed so polite, so professional. How could she have played a part in this? Betrayal upon betrayal, it felt like a never-ending spiral. What about legal action? Liam asked, glancing at Olivia. Do we have enough for charges? Absolutely, Jack confirmed. Financial fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder by abandonment, you name it. This guy's toast if you play your cards right. Liam nodded, relief flickering across his face. Good work, Jack. Send everything you've got to my secure server. We'll get it to Detective Dawson ASAP. Will do, Jack said. And hey, tell Olivia she's got one hell of a team on her side. Thanks, Jack, Olivia said softly, managing a small smile despite the turmoil inside her. For the first time, she truly believed that maybe, just maybe, they could win. After ending the call, Liam turned to Olivia. There's one more thing we need to do. Call your lawyer. My lawyer? She echoed, frowning. I haven't spoken to Rebecca in years. She's the best in the business, Liam reminded her. If anyone can take this case and see it through, it's her. Olivia hesitated, then nodded. She pulled up Rebecca Chen's contact information and dialed the number. After a few rings, a familiar voice answered. Rebecca Chen speaking. Rebecca, it's Olivia Carter, she began, her voice steadied despite the storm raging inside her. I know it's been a long time, but I need your help. There was a brief pause on the other end. Olivia? Of course, I remember you. What's going on? Quickly, Olivia explained the situation, Jason's betrayal, the stolen funds, the evidence they'd gathered. As she spoke, Rebecca listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When Olivia finished, there was a moment of silence before Rebecca responded. This sounds like a textbook case of financial exploitation and domestic abuse, Rebecca said firmly. I'll take the case pro bono. No one deserves to go through what you've been through, Olivia. Consider me your advocate. Tears pricked at the corners of Olivia's eyes, but this time, they weren't tears of despair. Thank you, Rebecca. I don't know what I'd do without people like you, and Liam. Don't thank me yet, Rebecca said with a wry chuckle. We've got a fight ahead of us. But trust me, we'll make sure justice is served. As Olivia ended the call, she looked up at Liam, who gave her an encouraging nod. Together, they had uncovered the truth. Together, they would bring Jason to justice. The cabin was quiet except for the soft hum of the laptop and the occasional crackle of the fire. Olivia sat at the table, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Across from her, Liam watched intently, his expression calm but alert. He had set up a recording app on her phone earlier, ensuring every word of the upcoming conversation would be captured. You ready for this? Liam asked quietly, his voice steady. Olivia nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. As ready as I'll ever be. Liam reached across the table and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. You've got this. Just stay calm and let him talk. The more he says, the better. Taking a deep breath, Olivia opened her contacts and scrolled to Jason's name. Her thumb hovered over the call button for a moment before she pressed it. The phone rang once, twice, and then Jason's voice came through the speaker. "Olivia?" His tone was sharp, laced with surprise, and something else. "Fear? Suspicion?" "It's me," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "I thought you'd want to know. I'm still alive." There was a long pause on the other end, heavy with tension. When Jason finally spoke, his voice was colder, harder. "Still alive? How is that possible? You should have frozen to death out there." Olivia clenched her jaw, forcing herself to remain composed. "Funny thing about being abandoned, you tend to find ways to survive. Especially when someone like Liam Foster happens to show up." Jason's laugh was harsh, almost mocking. "Foster? That washed-up ex-boyfriend of yours? Figures he'd come crawling back to play hero. Tell me, Olivia, how does it feel knowing no one really cares about you? Not me, not him, not anyone." Her heart ached at his words, but she refused to let him see how much they stung. Instead, she leaned into the pain, using it to fuel her resolve. "You're wrong, Jason. People do care. And thanks to them, I know everything now, the stolen money, the offshore accounts, Lauren. Did you really think you could get away with it?" Another pause, longer this time. Then Jason's voice turned venomous. "You were supposed to die out there, Olivia. It was supposed to be clean, simple. No loose ends. But clearly, I underestimated your ability to ruin things." His admission hit her like a punch to the gut, but she didn't falter. She needed him to keep talking, to dig himself deeper. "Why, Jason? Why go through all that trouble just to leave me stranded? Was it worth it? All those years of lying, pretending to love me, did any of it mean anything to you? Love?" Jason spat the word like it was poison. "Don't flatter yourself. You were convenient, a pretty face to parade around while I built my empire. But after your accident, you became nothing but a burden. A useless, expensive mistake. So yes, Olivia, it was worth it. Every last penny I took from you, every lie I told, it was all worth it to be rid of you." Tears pricked at the corners of Olivia's eyes, but she blinked them away, focusing instead on the rage burning within her. This was the man she had trusted, the man she had loved. Now, stripped bare of his lies, he was nothing more than a coward. "That's all I needed to hear," she said coldly, her voice cutting through the line like steel. "Goodbye, Jason." Before he could respond, she ended the call and set the phone down on the table. The room fell silent except for the faint sound of her uneven breathing. For a moment, neither she nor Liam spoke. Then Liam broke the silence, his voice low but triumphant. "That's all we need," he said, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied nod. "That confession alone is enough to put him away for good." Olivia stared at the phone, her mind racing. Hearing Jason's words aloud, his cruelty, his betrayal, it was both devastating and liberating. She felt raw, exposed, but also stronger than she had in months. With each passing second, the weight of his abuse began to lift, replaced by a fierce determination to reclaim her life. "What now?" she asked finally, looking up at Liam. "Now," he said, standing and picking up the phone, "we take this recording to Detective Dawson. Along with the financial records Jack sent us, it's an open and shut case. Jason's going down, Olivia. And when this is over, you can start fresh. On your terms." She managed a small smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. It's hard to imagine moving forward after all this. But I think I'm ready to try. Liam crouched beside her, meeting her gaze with unwavering intensity. "You don't have to figure it all out right now. Take it one step at a time. And remember, you're not alone anymore." For the first time since the nightmare began, Olivia truly believed him. Together, they had uncovered the truth. Together, they would ensure justice prevailed. As they packed up the evidence and prepared to leave the cabin, she allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope, not just for revenge, but for redemption. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the sleek, modern office as Jason Carter leaned back in his leather chair, scrolling through emails on his laptop. Across from him, Lauren Mitchell sat perched on the edge of his desk, her high heels tapping rhythmically against the polished floor. They were finalizing their escape plan, burner phones purchased, passports ready, flights booked for a remote island where no one would find them. "This is it," Jason said with a smug grin, closing his laptop. "By this time tomorrow, we'll be sipping margaritas on a beach somewhere. No Olivia, no debts, no problems." Lauren smiled faintly, though unease flickered in her eyes. "You're sure she's taken care of?" "Completely," Jason replied coldly. "She's probably dead by now, or close enough that it doesn't matter. Either way, she's out of our lives forever." Before Lauren could respond, the sound of heavy boots echoed down the hallway outside. Both of them froze, exchanging a glance as the noise grew louder. Then, without warning, the door to Jason's office burst open, and Detective Sarah Dawson strode in, flanked by two uniformed officers. "Jason Carter, you're under arrest," Sarah announced firmly, her badge glinting under the harsh overhead lights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Jason's face went pale, his confident demeanor crumbling instantly. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, standing abruptly. "On what grounds?" "Attempted murder, financial fraud, conspiracy, the list goes on," Sarah replied coolly, gesturing for the officers to cuff him. "We've got recordings, bank statements, emails, everything we need to lock you up for a very long time." As the handcuffs clicked into place, Jason turned toward Lauren, his expression desperate. "Do something. Tell them I didn't do this." But Lauren was already backing away, her hands raised defensively. "I don't know anything about any of this," she stammered, her voice trembling. "Whatever you did, it's not my fault." "Oh, but it is," Sarah interjected, stepping closer to Lauren. "You're coming with us too, Ms. Mitchell." "Accessory to attempted murder? That's not exactly a slap on the wrist." Lauren's knees buckled slightly as an officer approached, reading her rights aloud. She shot Jason a betrayed glare before being led out of the room, leaving him alone with the detective. "You made one mistake too many," Sarah said, her tone icy as she guided Jason toward the door. "And now, it's over." Meanwhile, back at Liam's cabin, Olivia sat on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen while absently twisting the edge of the blanket around her fingers. Her mind raced with images of Jason's arrest, replaying Sarah's words in her head, "It's over." But was it really? The legal battle was just beginning, and the scars Jason had left behind wouldn't heal overnight. Her thoughts were interrupted by the buzz of her phone. It was a text from Liam, "It's done. He's in custody." Relief washed over her like a tidal wave, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to exhale fully. Tears welled up in her eyes, not of sadness, but of release. The man who had tried to destroy her was finally facing consequences for his actions. A knock at the door startled her, and she quickly wiped her tears before calling out, "Come in." Liam stepped inside, his expression softening when he saw her. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," she admitted, managing a small smile. "Better than I thought I'd be, honestly. Knowing he's behind bars, it feels like a weight has been lifted." He crossed the room and sat beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You deserve this moment, Olivia. You fought hard for it." She nodded, though her smile faded slightly. "But the fight isn't over yet, is it? There's still the trial, the media attention." "One step at a time," Liam reminded her gently. "You've got Rebecca, Detective Dawson, and me in your corner. We'll get through this together. Olivia leaned back against the couch, letting his words sink in. For so long, she'd felt powerless, trapped in a nightmare of Jason's making. But now, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her, she realized she wasn't alone anymore. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them head-on, with strength, resilience, and support. Outside, the sun began to set, casting warm hues across the horizon. As Olivia gazed out the window, she allowed herself to imagine a future free from fear, a future where she could rebuild her life on her own terms. And for the first time in a long time, she believed it was possible. The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs as Olivia sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The air was thick with tension, and the polished wooden benches gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights. Across the aisle, Jason sat at the defendant's table, his once charming smile replaced by a scowl of defiance. Beside him, his high-priced lawyer whispered urgently into his ear, strategizing one last attempt to save him from the inevitable. Rebecca Chen stood nearby, reviewing notes with Detective Sarah Dawson. Every so often, Rebecca would glance over at Olivia, offering a reassuring nod. Liam and Jack sat in the back of the room, their expressions grim but resolute. This was it, the culmination of weeks of investigation, planning, and preparation. "All rise," the bailiff announced, his voice cutting through the low hum of conversation. Judge Margaret Hayes entered the chamber, her black robe flowing behind her as she took her seat at the bench. With a sharp rap of her gavel, she signaled for the trial to resume. "Ms. Chen, you may call your next witness," Judge Hayes said, her tone authoritative. Rebecca rose to her feet, smoothing out her tailored blazer. "Your Honor, the prosecution calls Olivia Carter to the stand." Olivia felt her heart race as she stood, gripping the armrest of her chair for support. Her legs trembled slightly beneath her, but she forced herself to move forward, step by deliberate step. As she settled into the witness chair, she glanced toward Jason. His icy glare sent a shiver down her spine, but she refused to look away. This was her moment to tell the truth, to expose him for who he really was. After being sworn in, Olivia turned to face Rebecca, who gave her an encouraging smile before beginning her questioning. "Ms. Carter," Rebecca began gently, "can you please tell the court what happened on the night of October 12th? Olivia took a deep breath, steadying herself. "That night, my husband, Jason Carter, drove me into the woods under false pretenses. He told me we were going on a trip, but instead, he abandoned me there. Alone, without proper supplies or means of communication. It was cold, dark, and I couldn't walk because of my paralysis. He left me to die." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, but she pressed on, determined not to let emotion overshadow the facts. "I survived only because Liam Foster found me and brought me to safety." Rebecca nodded sympathetically. "And how did you discover the financial crimes committed against you?" "I accessed old email accounts and bank records," Olivia explained. "They revealed that Jason had been stealing from me for months, transferring large sums of money into offshore accounts. He planned to disappear with Lauren Mitchell, leaving me behind to take the blame." As Olivia spoke, Jason's lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit named Charles Whitaker, scribbled furiously on a notepad. When Rebecca finished her questioning, he rose to his feet, his demeanor calm but condescending. "Ms. Carter," Whitaker began, pacing slowly in front of the jury box, "isn't it true that you've struggled emotionally since your accident? That you became dependent on Mr. Carter for everything?" "Yes, I required assistance," Olivia admitted, her voice unwavering. "But that doesn't give anyone the right to steal from me, or try to kill me." Whitaker smirked faintly. "Of course not. But isn't it possible that your perception of events has been clouded by anger and resentment? Perhaps you misunderstood my client's intentions." "No," Olivia shot back, her tone firm. "I didn't misunderstand anything. I have recordings of Jason admitting to what he did. evidence proving his guilt beyond any doubt. The courtroom erupted in whispers, and Judge Hayes rapped her gavel sharply. "Order. Mr. Whittaker, proceed." Realizing he wasn't getting anywhere with Olivia, Whittaker quickly wrapped up his cross-examination and returned to his seat. Rebecca stood again, addressing the judge. "Your Honor, the prosecution would now like to call Liam Foster to the stand." Liam approached the witness chair with confidence, his military bearing evident in every step. After being sworn in, he recounted the events of the night he found Olivia in the woods, detailing how he'd followed Jason's SUV and intervened just in time. Then, turning to Jack, who handed over a folder of documents, Liam presented the ironclad evidence they'd gathered: emails, financial records, and surveillance footage showing Jason meeting with Lauren to discuss their escape plan. "The defense can spin this however they want," Rebecca concluded during her closing argument, "but the truth is undeniable. Jason Carter betrayed his wife, stole from her, and attempted to murder her. The evidence proves it all." When Whittaker delivered his rebuttal, his arguments fell flat. No amount of rhetorical flair could counteract the mountain of proof stacked against his client. As the jury deliberated, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew electric with anticipation. Finally, after nearly 2 hours, the foreman stood to deliver the verdict. "We find the defendant, Jason Carter, guilty on all counts." A collective gasp rippled through the gallery, followed by murmurs of relief. Olivia exhaled deeply, tears streaming down her face as she buried her head in her hands. It was over. Justice had been served. From the back of the room, Liam caught her eye and gave her a small, proud smile. She returned it, feeling lighter than she had in years. Though the road ahead wouldn't be easy, she knew she had the strength, and the support, to rebuild her life. Months had passed since the trial, and Olivia Carter stood on the porch of her newly renovated home, a steaming mug of coffee cradled in her hands. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke, and the golden sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the yard. It was peaceful here, a stark contrast to the chaos she'd endured just a year ago. Her life had transformed in ways she never thought possible. With Jason behind bars and Lauren facing her own charges, Olivia had regained control of her finances and her architectural firm. What had once been a crumbling business on the brink of collapse was now thriving under her leadership. She'd rehired trusted employees, secured lucrative contracts, and even spearheaded several community projects that earned her local acclaim. But perhaps her proudest accomplishment was the foundation she'd started, Phoenix Rising, a non-profit dedicated to supporting survivors of domestic abuse and financial exploitation. The idea had come to her during one of her darkest nights, when she realized how many others might be suffering in silence, trapped in situations they felt powerless to escape. Now, the foundation provided counseling, legal assistance, and job training programs, all aimed at helping people rebuild their lives. As she sipped her coffee, the sound of tires crunching on gravel caught her attention. Turning toward the driveway, she saw Liam's truck pull up, its headlights glinting in the morning light. He stepped out wearing his signature leather jacket, a small duffel bag slung over his shoulder. His dark hair was tousled from the drive, and his sharp features softened into a warm smile as he approached. "Morning," he greeted her, stopping at the base of the porch steps. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Olivia chuckled, shaking her head. "Not unless you count arguing with my contractor about the kitchen tiles." "You're always welcome, Liam." He climbed the steps and joined her on the porch, leaning against the railing as he surveyed the property. "Place is looking good. Feels like home." "It does," she agreed, her gaze drifting to the horizon. "For the first time in years, it really feels like mine." There was a pause, comfortable yet charged with unspoken emotions. Over the past few months, their relationship had evolved slowly but steadily. They weren't rushing things, not after everything they'd both been through, but there was an undeniable connection between them. A shared history, yes, but also a newfound understanding and trust. "How's Jack?" Olivia asked, breaking the silence. "Still chasing leads all over the country?" Liam grinned. "You know him, he thrives on the chaos. Last I heard, he was tracking down some scam artist in Florida. Says it's keeping him young." She laughed softly, then sobered slightly. "And you? Any big cases keeping you busy these days?" "Actually," he said, hesitating for a moment, "I've been thinking about taking a break. Maybe settling down somewhere quieter. Somewhere closer to, well, to people who matter." Olivia's breath caught in her throat, though she tried to play it cool. "That sounds nice. Any particular reason?" He met her gaze, his expression softening. "Let's just say I've spent enough time running from the past. It's time I started building something real. Something worth staying for." Her heart skipped a beat, and she looked away briefly, unsure how to respond. For so long, she'd guarded herself against hope, afraid of being hurt again. But standing here now, with Liam by her side, her life finally back on track, she couldn't deny the warmth spreading through her chest. "I think that's a good idea," she said finally, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "This place could use a little more company." Liam smiled, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'll take that as an invitation." They stood there for a moment, the world around them fading into the background. Then Olivia turned back toward the sunrise, her lips curving into a genuine smile, the kind she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in years, she murmured, almost to herself, "I'm free." And for the first time in a long time, she believed it wholeheartedly. At the heart of Olivia's harrowing journey is a powerful message about resilience, trust, and the courage to rebuild. Her story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, there is always a glimmer of hope, sometimes hidden, but never truly extinguished. Betrayal can cut deep, leaving scars that take time to heal, but it doesn't define who we are or what we're capable of achieving. Instead, it shapes us, teaching lessons we might not have chosen but ultimately need. Olivia's fight wasn't just against Jason, it was against the fear, self-doubt, and isolation he tried to impose on her. She learned that asking for help isn't a sign of weakness, it's an act of strength. Whether it was Liam stepping in when she needed him most, Rebecca fighting tirelessly for justice, or Detective Dawson ensuring the truth came to light, Olivia discovered the power of leaning on others. None of us are meant to face life's battles alone. Her transformation, from a woman betrayed and abandoned to someone reclaiming her independence and inspiring others, is proof that no matter how far you fall, you can rise again stronger than before. And while her road wasn't easy, every step forward mattered. Every small victory brought her closer to freedom, not just from Jason, but from the shadow of his control over her life. This story also shines a light on the importance of recognizing red flags early. Too often, we dismiss warning signs because we want to believe the best in people. But as Olivia learned, ignoring those instincts can come at a cost. Trust your gut, value yourself enough to demand respect, and know that walking away, even when it feels impossible, is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. Now, if stories like Olivia's resonate with you, if you find yourself rooting for characters who overcome incredible odds and emerge victorious, I invite you to join me for more. There are countless tales waiting to be told, each one filled with suspense, emotion, and inspiration. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a single episode. Your support means everything to me, and I promise to bring you narratives that will keep you hooked until the very end. Because everyone deserves a story they can't put down, and I'm here to deliver them, one unforgettable chapter at a time. Thank you for being part of this journey. Let's keep exploring the depths of human strength together.